The rain hammered against the windows of our small cottage in the Cotswolds, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. For 20 years, Alara had been my anchor, my best friend, the woman I'd built my life around. We met at a local art fair, I, a struggling ceramicist, and she, a vibrant textile designer. Her laughter was like sunshine, and her spirit, a kaleidoscope of colors that drew me in from the moment we spoke. We married 2 years later in a simple ceremony in our garden, surrounded by friends, family, and the burgeoning vegetable patch we'd painstakingly cultivated together. Our life wasn't extravagant, but it was rich with love and shared passions. Alara's textile designs adorned our home, vibrant tapestries and cushions that told stories of our life together. My pottery filled the shelves, each piece a testament to the hours I spent at the wheel, shaping clay into something beautiful and functional. We were a team, a partnership, a testament to the enduring power of love. Quentin, and at 46 I thought I had it all figured out. My pottery studio, nestled in the converted barn behind our house, was my sanctuary. Alara's design studio occupied the attic, flooded with natural light that streamed through the skylights. We'd often take breaks together, meeting in the kitchen for a cup of tea and a shared moment of quiet connection. Then came the email. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, innocuous and unassuming. I was working on a new series of vases, my hands covered in clay, when my phone buzzed. It was an email from an unknown address, the subject line simply reading, "Truth." Curiosity piqued, I wiped my hands and opened it. The email contained several photos. Photos of Alara. Photos of Alara with a man I didn't recognize. Photos of Alara kissing him, holding his hand, laughing with him. Photos of Alara entering a hotel with him. The world tilted. The images swam before my eyes, each one a dagger twisting in my heart. It couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Alara, my Alara, the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world. My breath hitched and a cold sweat broke out across my skin. I scrolled through the photos again, each one confirming the horrifying truth. The man was tall, dark-haired, and undeniably handsome. He had an arm slung casually around Alara's shoulder in one photo, his fingers intertwined with hers in another. They looked happy, happier than I'd seen Alara in months. A wave of nausea washed over me and I stumbled to the sink, barely making it in time to empty the contents of my stomach. The bile burned my throat, a physical manifestation of the pain that was tearing me apart inside. I sank to the floor, the phone clutched in my trembling hand. How could this be? What had I done wrong? Had I not been attentive enough? Had I not been loving enough? Had I somehow driven her into the arms of another man? My mind raced, searching for answers, for explanations, for anything that could make sense of this nightmare. But there were no answers, no explanations, only the stark, undeniable reality of the photos. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, unable to work, unable to eat, unable to think of anything other than the images seared into my brain. I replayed our last few months together in my mind, searching for clues, for signs that I had missed. Alara had been distant lately, I realized. She'd been working late, often claiming to have deadlines to meet. She'd been less affectionate, less interested in spending time with me. I'd chalked it up to stress, to the pressures of her work. But now, looking back, I saw it for what it was, a slow, agonizing withdrawal. That evening, Alara came home, her face flushed, her eyes bright. She breezed into the kitchen, humming a tune, and kissed me on the cheek. "How was your day, darling?" she asked, her voice light and cheerful. The question hung in the air, a cruel mockery of our shared life. How was my day? My day had been shattered, destroyed, irrevocably altered by the discovery of her betrayal. But I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I needed time to process, to gather my thoughts, to prepare myself for the inevitable confrontation. "It was fine," I replied, my voice flat. "Just working on the vases." Alara nodded, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. She started preparing dinner, her movements graceful and familiar. I watched her, my heart aching with a mixture of love and pain. How could she be so normal? How could she pretend that everything was okay when she was living a lie? We ate dinner in silence, the unspoken truth hanging between us like a thick fog. I picked at my food, unable to swallow, my appetite gone. Alara chatted about her day, about a new client she'd landed, about a design competition she was considering entering. I listened numbly, my mind replaying the images from the email. After dinner, Alara went upstairs to work in her studio. I stayed downstairs, staring into the flickering flames of the fireplace, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, disbelief, they all swirled together, threatening to consume me. I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. I had to confront her. I had to know the truth. But I was terrified of what she would say, of what she would reveal. What if she admitted to being unhappy? What if she said she no longer loved me? What if she said she wanted to leave? The thought of losing Alara, of losing our life together, was unbearable. But the thought of living a lie, of pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't, was equally unbearable. I spent the night tossing and turning, unable to sleep, my mind consumed by the email and the photos. I imagined Alara with this other man, laughing, talking, sharing intimate moments. The images were like knives, twisting and turning in my gut. Finally, as dawn broke, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I got out of bed, dressed, and went upstairs to Alara's studio. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear the faint sound of music playing inside. I hesitated for a moment, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. Alara was sitting at her drafting table, sketching a design, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up as I entered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Quentin, what are you doing up here?" she asked, her voice a little too bright. I held up my phone, the screen displaying one of the photos from the email. Alara's face paled. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Alara stared at the phone, her eyes darting back and forth. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I want the truth, Alara," I said, my voice hardening. "Who is this man?" Alara's shoulders slumped, and she let out a long, weary sigh. "His name is Lysander," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Lysander," I repeated, the name unfamiliar on my tongue. "Who is he?" "He's a colleague," Alara said, her eyes avoiding mine. "A colleague," I scoffed. "Is that what you call someone you're having an affair with?" Alara flinched as if it struck her. "It's not like that," she said, her voice rising in protest. "Then what is it like, Alara?" I demanded. "Tell me the truth." Alara hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and began to speak. She told me that she'd met Lysander at a design conference in London a few months ago. He was a renowned textile designer, and she'd been drawn to his talent and his passion. They'd struck up a conversation, and she'd found herself drawn to his energy and his enthusiasm. "We just connected," she said, her voice pleading. "I know it sounds click, but it's true. We have so much in common, so many shared interests. He understands me in a way that you don't." Her words were like a punch to the gut. "What are you saying, Alara?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I'm saying that I've been unhappy for a long time, Quentin," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you, I do, but I'm not in love with you anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the ground had opened up beneath me, swallowing me whole. "How could you do this, Alara?" I asked, my voice choked with emotion. "How could you betray me like this?" "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for it to happen, but it did, and I can't deny it anymore." "So what now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What happens to us?" Alara looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness. I think we need to separate," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Separate." The word echoed in my mind, a death knell for our marriage. 20 years. 20 years of love, laughter, and shared dreams, all crumbling to dust in a single moment. I stared at Alara, my heart breaking into a million pieces. I couldn't believe that this was happening, that our life together was coming to an end. "I need some time," I said, my voice hoarse. "I need to think." Alara nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need." I turned and walked out of the studio, my legs feeling like lead. I stumbled downstairs, out of the house, and into the garden. The rain had stopped, and the sun was beginning to peek through the clouds. But the world felt cold and gray, devoid of all color and light. I wandered aimlessly through the garden, my mind numb with shock and grief. I stopped in front of the vegetable patch we'd cultivated together, the rows of plants now overgrown and neglected. It was a reflection of our marriage, I realized, once vibrant and thriving, now withered and decaying. I spent the next few days in a fog, barely eating, barely sleeping, barely functioning. I avoided Alara, unable to face her, unable to speak to her. I slept in the spare bedroom, the silence of the house amplifying the emptiness in my heart. I knew I couldn't stay in the cottage. It was too full of memories, too full of Alara. I needed to escape, to find some space to breathe, to heal. I called my friend Barnaby, who lived in a small coastal town in Cornwall. Barnaby was a retired fisherman, a gruff but kind-hearted man who'd always been there for me. I told him what had happened, and he immediately offered me a place to stay. "Come down here, Quentin," he said, his voice gruff but comforting. "The sea air will do you good. Well, drink some whiskey, tell some stories, and forget all about that hussy." I packed a bag, threw it in my car, and drove south, leaving the cottage, leaving Alara, leaving my old life behind. The drive was long and arduous, the miles stretching out before me like an endless road. I replayed the events of the past few days in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made, only pain and betrayal. I arrived in Cornwall late that night, exhausted and emotionally drained. Barnaby greeted me with a warm hug and a shot of whiskey. His small cottage was cozy and welcoming, a stark contrast to the emptiness I'd left behind. I spent the next few weeks with Barnaby, slowly beginning to heal. We fished, we walked along the beach, we drank whiskey, and we talked. Barnaby listened patiently as I poured out my heart, offering words of wisdom and support. "She wasn't worth you, lad," he said one evening as we sat by the fire. "You're a good man, Quint. You deserve better than that." I knew he was right. Alara had betrayed me, had broken my heart, had shattered my trust. I couldn't forgive her, not now, maybe not ever. As the weeks passed, I began to feel a shift within me. The pain was still there, but it was becoming more bearable. I started to think about the future, about what I wanted to do with my life. I realized that I couldn't let Alara's betrayal define me. I had to move on, to rebuild my life, to find happiness again. I decided to sell the cottage. It was too painful to stay there, surrounded by memories of Alara. I contacted a real estate agent and put the house on the market. I also decided to focus on my pottery. It had always been my passion, my creative outlet, my source of joy. I set up a small studio in Barnaby's shed and started working on new pieces, pouring my emotions into the clay. One day, as I was working on a new vase, I had an idea. I decided to create a series of vases inspired by the sea, by the colors and textures of the Cornish coast. I called the series New Beginnings. The vases were a hit. They were beautiful, unique, and full of emotion. I started selling them at local craft fairs and online, and they quickly became popular. People were drawn to the story behind them, to the idea of starting over, of finding beauty in the face of adversity. As my pottery business thrived, I began to feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment that I hadn't felt in years. I was still heartbroken, still angry, still struggling to come to terms with Alara's betrayal. But I was also hopeful, optimistic, and determined to create a new life for myself. One afternoon, as I was packing up after a craft fair, I saw Alara standing in the distance. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen her since I left the cottage. She walked towards me, her face pale, her eyes filled with sadness. "Quint," she said, her voice barely audible. "Can we talk?" I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk." We walked to a nearby cafe and sat down at a table. Alara looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I'm so sorry, Quint," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you and I regret it every day." "Why, Alara?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you do it?" Alara sighed. "I don't know," she said. "I was lost, I was confused, I was unhappy. I thought Lysander could make me happy, but I was wrong." "Are you still with him?" I asked. Alara shook her head. "No," she said. "It didn't work out. He wasn't who I thought he was." "So what do you want, Alara?" I asked. "Why are you here?" Alara looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I want you back, Quentin," she said. "I want us to try again. I know I messed up, but I've learned my lesson. I promise I'll never do anything to hurt you again." I stared at Alara, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to take her back, to rebuild our life together. But another part of me was still too hurt, too angry, too distrustful. "I don't know, Alara," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "I need time to think. I need to decide if I can ever trust you again." Alara nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I understand," she said. "I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes." I left the cafe, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't know what to do, what to think, what to feel. I needed time, time to heal, time to decide what I wanted. I continued to focus on my pottery, on my new life in Cornwall. I made new friends, explored new places, and discovered new passions. Slowly but surely, I began to heal, to move on, to find happiness again. One day, a few months later, I received a letter from Alara. She wrote that she had moved to London and was working as a freelance designer. She said that she was doing well, that she was happy, and that she understood if I couldn't forgive her. I read the letter, my heart aching with a mixture of sadness and relief. I realized that I couldn't go back to Alara, that we were too different, that we wanted different things. But I also realized that I didn't hate her, that I didn't want her to be unhappy. I wrote her a letter back, wishing her well and thanking her for the good times we'd shared. I didn't mention the possibility of reconciliation, but I did say that I hoped we could be friends someday. I never heard from Alara again, but I knew that she was okay, that she was moving on with her life, just as I was moving on with mine. I continued to live in Cornwall, to work on my pottery, to enjoy the beauty of the coast. I found love again, with a kind and compassionate woman named Braunt, who appreciated my art and my soul. We built a new life together, a life filled with love, laughter, and shared passions. Ilara's betrayal had been a painful chapter in my life, but it had also been a catalyst for change. It had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, to discover my own strengths, and to create a new life that was more fulfilling and authentic than the one it had before. And so, I learned that even in the face of betrayal, it is possible to heal, to move on, and to find happiness again. The scars may remain, but they serve as a reminder of the lessons we've learned, of the strength we've found, and of the resilience of the human spirit. Years later, I found out the truth. Email was sent by Lysander's wife after she caught him cheating with Alara. Karma is a dish best served cold, it seems.